Community Lady กำลังทอล์กเกี่ยวกับ Headland Farm Park Anniversary
We'll give it a go without. Okay. Thank you. I'm not quite sure what I've done to deserve this honour.
ตอนนี้
I suspect it's because my age rather than the time I've been here.
เชิญให้วิลเลียมขึ้นพูดในฐานะที่คนแก่ที่สุดใน
Yeah, I came in the
Park
second canoe. I wasn't one of the first. So I think there were 8 families here. I was in the second canoe. Forest projects at the time were going through a lean time. I can remember the first time I drove past it when they were setting it up. And the price of sections were 80,000-90,000. And that time,
พูดถึง
I'm
ประ
only
วัติ
talking a long
การ
time ago.
ทำ
I
งานใน
remember looking
Headland
up
Farm
and
Park
thinking, that'll be a right bloody snob hill, that'll be.
และเทคนิคการพูดของแกจะชอบพูดเรื่องตลก
And I mean, I've been here 33 years and it never turned out that way. You know, not the people who are here now. All then, it's just a perception. And you have to remember that what you have now in Headland Farm Park wasn't there then. This is the work of a lot of people who have now died or gone to retirement homes over the years. And that is the benefit you have when you look around now. But to go back to the start, first farm manager that was here when I came, he set the place up. His name was Tom Rowbottom. And he was a gentleman. He was a lovely man. And unfortunately, his son was a doctor working at the hospital, only young. And he came home for lunch one day, the farm manager, and his son was dead in the car. He had committed suicide. And Tom stayed, bad area for me. Tom stayed for 2 years, you know, through that. But then it got to him as more people built houses, he couldn't handle too many people, you know. So he left. And the interesting part comes up next was we had a farm manager briefly called Nigel. The board at the time decided to get rid of the stock and we'd only go for deer, for the velvet. The price had already started to fall, but however, because they were going to be only stags, they weren't going to breed at all. So it took 3 months for him to strengthen the fences ready for the stags. Well, with 3 months with no stock, of course there was grass growing everywhere. So people were not at all happy at the time. Not at all happy. And interesting thing with stags, when they're roaring, when you're hunting, I suppose it might sound great when you're sleeping out in the bush and you're on a stag roar. When you get 100 odd under your bloody bedroom window, it's not funny. And talk about Randy, like, you know, all of a sudden here's these stags, one stops and immediately stops, another stag's on his back. And they were like a daisy chain, all leaping up. And then one would walk and the whole thing collapsed. Then another one would stop and it's the same thing again. I used to watch from my bedroom window in sheer amazement. But, you know, anyway, that was quite a humorous time. But that didn't last and they suddenly realized this wasn't meant for Headland Farm Park and the stags were sold off and then we had to restock, which cost money like always. Anyway, so that was the end of Nigel. Because that was the only thing Nigel knew. He was a young fella, only knew about deer. And after that we had Dave Burchett come along. And Dave was with us 7 years, very good guy, until he was headhunted. And Dave, the board at that time, it was very interesting. One of the directors, and he had deer farms down the South Island, but he had another habit. He used to make his own booze in the garage. And he used to imbibe in it too much. And so they'd have directors meeting that went on till 1 o'clock in the morning with a lot of bad language. So it was not a good place for the poor secretary at the time. And then he took a snitch on the farm manager, Dave. And so I won't repeat names who was on the board, but the chairman at the time, who listened to this guy particularly, also had a snitch on the farm manager. And then one day out of the blue, he rang the farm manager and said, "You're sacked." And the farm manager said, "What for?" "Because you're interfering with the politics of the park," and quoted who he'd been talking to, this lady. And when they checked out, this lady said, "No, that's bullshit, it wasn't true, you know." Now here we are in a situation where your employee has been sacked with no justification whatsoever, nothing in writing, no warning. Well, what are we going to do here? So anyway, I don't know if I should tell you this.
Too much, I think too
But
much.
the director of our zone, B zone, at the time, Colin Porter, house was up for sale. And he wasn't happy on the board, given what was happening. And so I rang him and said, "Colin, do you really want to do this? Your house is up for sale and that?" He said, "No, I don't want to do it." I said, "Well, step down and I'll put my name up." See, that's all right. And in the meantime, A zone called a special meeting because everybody's worried about being sued, you know. So they had a special meeting and asked their director to apologise to the farm manager. He wouldn't, so he said, "Well, step down." And Pat's husband Roger came in for A zone. So, okay, there we are. We go to our first directors meeting. So we've got the guy who liked the booze from D zone. And we had a stand-in director for C zone because the guy was in Australia for a year. So anyway,
Why you laugh?
Roger said, "Nominate chairman." So Roger said, "Bob Martin." So there's silence. Nobody says anything. Finally, the one who liked to drink said, "Oh, I'll second it." Okay, so I'm chairman. I said, "First order of business, apologies to the farm manager." Well, the guy, his red started there, went right up to the top. And he, "I'm out of here," he said. So the other guy did, and then so
ผม
we
พูด
got
ถึง
new
ตอนที่
directors. The others were gone.
เรื่อง
We had prosperity for
เรื่อง
peace.
ความ
I wouldn't say
อะไรนะ
prosperity
แช
for
ร์แม
quite
น
a long
ตอนที่
time.
เขาจะได้เป็น
But
แชร์แมน
there
นะ
were,
มี
you know,
ผู้
these
ชาย
are
คนหนึ่งไม่
interesting
ต้องการ
things.
ให้เป็น
Another time,
เขาได้เป็น
the board had decided that when I was on it too, that there were 3 trees on the corner. I think, what do you call it down, as Dyland Way down there? Yeah. And they weren't very big, but they were very close together, and the sheep were even getting jammed between them, you see. And the bitumen's there and the trees here. So we decided to take 2 down and leave 1 there as the marker. And the farmer tried to cut these 2 down. And we had one resident raising out, hugging the trees, wouldn't let him. He couldn't use the chainsaw. Eventually, I had to go up and
พูด
stand
เรื่อง
with
แต่
the
เขาพูด
farmer
เรื่อง
and
ต
tell
ล
him
ก
to cut these 2 trees.
เกี่ยวกับสิ่งที่เกิดขึ้นในเฮดแลนด์ฟาร์มพาร์คตอนที่แก
Yeah,
เป็น
we
แช
had
ร์แมน
another funny one. And
พูด
this
ถึง
is
แต่
the
เรื่อง
early
ตลก
days.
มีแต่คนหัวเราะแก
One of the directors, actually I think it was chairman, but anyway, he woke up one morning and he'd been looking out of his lounge window and everything's nice, the land's falling away, nice little view. And all of a sudden there's a Keith A home there with a red roof. So, you know, it just come boom like that. It's constructed and they put it on the well, then the board would run around like chucks trying to work out how retrospectively they could change the rules. Yeah, there's been a number of instances, and that house actually ended up quite famous on this place. It was called the Druggies House. Because what happened, the mother and father sold up the business and went to work in Australia and left it to the son. Well, it's only twice we were on this farm, I think we've seen the cops out. There were about 4 or 5 cop cars that time, came out. One time the gang broke through the gate, and only one other time when there was a disturbance with a guy who made booze in the garage. But other than that, and there's never been a burglary on the place, you know, when you think about it, except the boat shed. There was a bad one there. The only one in that all this time that I've ever heard was kids got in one afternoon into someone's house. But I've actually never heard of a burglary except for the boat shed. So this, you know, this place is, it's had its interesting moments, shall we say, you know. And anyway, I'm not going to carry on any longer.